as we know it has vanished. As the streets emptied, everywhere locked down, and we were told to stay at home, I wondered the impact that this has had on the arts, specifically theatre and the Lisbon Players.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. We all adapt, and I have had to adapt to many situations in my life, and it's just another step in the journey. And so, pandemic is not anything, well, it's new, of course, to me, but I think I adapt to life in general anyway, so just get on with it.
It coincided more or less with the closure and emptying of the contents of Estrella Hall, a building I had been involved with for many years, off and on, sometimes with a year or so's break, but since 1982. It was an incredibly emotional and difficult time. That had to be done. Then came the virus, hot on the heels of leaving Estrella Hall. Before that, I'd been so lucky with my career. I'd been all over the place in Portugal, every far-flung corner you can imagine. I think to have managed to get to it, as well as Edinburgh and London and the West End and even India. And then all that stopped. And it was very sad because I was even going to have a chance of filming in Morocco last summer. But that was not to be. However, I can't really complain because my pandemic experience was so lucky in comparison with so many people.
I've had a lucky pandemic. I've been busier than ever because a lot of students, mainly from outside Portugal, have come for online lessons.
Well, so what happened when the pandemic hit for me? Well, a number of things. First of all, I was meant to be directing or as consultant director to a show that was opening that night, the 11th of March, in a bookshop in Kaisersdorp. Cancelled. The next night, I had tickets for an opera at the CCB. Cancelled. And by the way, opera is one of my great loves.
So what have I been doing during the year that never was, the pandemic? Well, the pandemic absolved me of the responsibility and the social obligation that most of us in civilized society have of actually putting on trousers and meeting other people. I no longer had to be the man with pants. I could just wander about in my boxes, or less, and reach out to the entire world and meet them. Since most of my work and my social interaction involves just talking, just chewing the cud, this was perfect. This was absolutely perfect.
In my personal life, again, I was very fortunate because I didn't get sick. No one close got seriously sick either. So there was not a big impact. My daily routines didn't change that much. I must confess I didn't follow the lockdown rules too strictly. I kept going out in the neighborhood for a stroll or for doing the shopping and, doing outdoor activities whenever possible. So I didn't feel the lockdown that much. Of course, my social life dimmed a bit, but, then again, it was not that glittering to start with.
Well, this one doesn't really apply to us, right, so much, because we just moved back to the United States the month before the pandemic started.
I'm chairman of the Lisbon Players and have been chairman for the last 9 months. I've also had COVID, so I've had it for 7 weeks, but I'm very fortunate I didn't suffer from it. We have continued our meetings on a monthly basis in LP, trying to find a new place to be able to perform.
Yes, before the pandemic, I was pretty much a cynic, I have to say. I felt pretty much aggrieved that the entertainment part of my life, the evenings, going with my band, setting up, managing that aspect of things had been taken away from me. And so, I was a bit cynical about it all. So. And then, of course, I got it, and I got it really badly. I ended up hospitalised because of it. It was a terrible experience. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And that completely changed my attitude towards COVID. Whether it be politicised or not, it's not for me to say, but it's real, and it's not very pleasant. And so, coming out the back of that, I actually felt pretty lucky to be alive.
At first, the pandemic still felt far away. We only saw the images on television about China. But soon, after one of my work flights, I became sick. And after me, my sister. And after my sister, my parents. And from that moment on, everything just feels like a blur. My dad, he was hospitalized, and we had to bring him to the hospital not knowing when he would be released, if he would be released.
It was a very difficult time, the beginning of the pandemic, always feeling afraid. Now, after 1 year of pandemic, I kind of just find a way to keep going and to keep creating, even with all of that mess. Besides the feeling of fear, constant feeling of fear, I would say that somehow the pandemic made me so scared that I just decided to do more art in the end because it was worth it.
So in terms of being personally affected, it's the information that I've received from the media about how other people have been awfully affected personally by the pandemic. And I look out my window and imagine it all, and it's unbelievable. I think a lot of us probably feel.
I was giving lessons, classes of theater, like lessons of theater in a theater school. And so presential, of course. So when the pandemic struck, when the pandemic came, we had to, come up with a solution. So we migrated to online classes, which was kind of a little bit weird. I mean, I remember thinking, well, if this is an acting class, how can you do an acting class online?
When lockdown started, I was teaching at an international boarding school in Switzerland. My students were unable to return to school after the March holidays, and so teaching moved completely online, and I found myself having to learn to teach on Microsoft Teams. In June, I had to retire. And I retired online. And then we had a party, a get-together on Zoom, which was a glass of wine. And I said goodbye to my colleagues there.
Pandemic has, I suppose in some ways, taught me what is important in life. It's made me focus on where I want to go in life, what I want to do, and not to take anything for granted anymore. With the restrictions we've all faced, not being able to travel, which is a passion of mine, not being able to travel around the world, which I would do at the drop of a hat usually when I can afford it. But now the restrictions, not even being able to visit family back in the UK or not have them visit me, that's had a huge impact emotionally on me.
So the pandemic, yeah. It's been a fun year and a half so far. So professionally, in terms of theatre, obviously I haven't done any theatre itself, performance-wise or directing or anything, since December 2019, when I directed Chorus of Disapproval at Lisbon Players, which is the last thing I did. And that's really been it for theatre.
I have in my hands a letter from my mother. She talks about the book she has been reading. She talks about the pandemic, how sometimes she feels sad, sometimes she feels euphoric, about how she wanted the world had ended at the turn of the century. She wrote me this letter for my birthday and sent it over the sea, this long journey that a piece of paper makes, until it arrives in Portugal. My poetics comes from my mother. She is present in me beyond my genes. She teaches and punishes me in memory. My mother is the great mystery of my life. I have my mother's letter in my hands. She thanks the world for do not have ended at the turn of the century. This great destruction would have prevented the growth of my sister and me. She talks about not being able to dream in the past, many years relegated to silence, and how now she dreams and achieves. She talks about throwing some things away, cheap clothing and jewelry, boxes inside an old cabinet. My mother used to keep many things. My mother used to throw everything away. My mother wants to die and leave something for us, my sister and I. She wants us to have something after her death, a car, a house, love, affection, and yet she wished she had more to leave for us. I also wanted to leave something for her. We have nothing in our names, Mom. We have nothing. I also throw a lot of my stuff away. I'm always ready to move. No home is my home. All houses are transient. All my clothes are temporary. I throw all my things away, Mom, whenever possible, whenever I find time. I'm also euphoric. I'm also loneliness. We share so much, Mom. And yet, we still don't know each other. In my mother's letter, she says she runs to the sea when she's sad, when she's happy, and when she's sad. She talks twice about being sad. She repeats that she runs to the sea when she's sad. I still don't run to the sea. I'm afraid. I look at it from a distance through the window and I stop. I still don't run to the sea, Mom. I'm afraid. I'm afraid that one day another letter will never arrive.
During the pandemic, live theatre wasn't possible. We all had to stay at home and we couldn't go to the theatre. We couldn't even be together. But during this time, there was a real sense of creativity that emerged. That's exactly what happened to Mandy, and she came up with the idea of her Zoom show. And with the help of Cassandra and David, they produced live theatre in a time when that seemed impossible. So I met with them to find out more about the creative process and how the experience was for them.
Well, we were in lockdown and it felt important to get the Lisbon Players community together. We hadn't seen each other for a while, and also I'd been seeing interesting things on Zoom, and so I thought, why not? You agreed to it?
Yeah, and the idea sounded fantastic, especially for its format, which was so new, and if things didn't go well, it'll at least be a learning experience and a challenge.
So we started meeting, and we had so many ideas, bursting with ideas. Then we thought of dear Cassandra, and we asked, firstly, if she'd be interested in doing box office, and she agreed to help us all technically, and that's when it all really started coming together.
While he was interacting with Mandy, I thought it'd be quite difficult, so I agreed to do the technical assisting, which was an experience in itself.
So how did you make it reality then? It sounds like you had loads of challenges. How did you make it happen?
Well, once we'd said we were going to do, we had to do. How did we get it together?
Yeah, how did you make it happen?
How did we get it together?
So Mandy had you were writing a script, weren't you? And we were meeting regularly. That was good. We were meeting 2 to 3 times a week,
That's
weren't
true,
we?
yeah.
Just the 3 of us. And so we'd come together and just do a little section, didn't we? And each time we did it, it just grew, didn't it?
We approached it like a play. We set up a schedule. Let's rehearse this scene and this scene and this scene, and then we'll get together and try to do a little run of it. But this, in this sort of new format, this sort of post-apocalyptic kind of dimension that we were bringing ourselves into.
Did we discard any ideas?
Was that something that we said, let's not do that, it's going to be impossible?
No, I don't think
No,
so.
we
I think we went along with everything.
So it was a combination between scripted and making it up as you go along. But there was a definite script. There had to be, because of all the technical moves.
Yeah.
For example, the beginning of the show was really complex. The first 30 seconds, it was like turn on video, turn off video, mute, unmute. Did that bit, which was all about Auntie Marjorie's technical incapacities and how everything went wrong right from the beginning, which kind of gave us a protection, because then if everything did go wrong, people would think it was part of the show.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we did have a technical issue with the goat. Brett the goat had no sound, which Winston realised and started doing goat noises.
Yeah, I had to do something, and so I sort of covered my mouth and what? So, but those are the beautiful things that happen on stage, actually, is when you have mistakes. Those are golden moments for a performer, because if you have to run along with them, and that's when beautiful things happen.
It was very
a
funny.
mistake.
But that goat really gave us quite a few headaches. But there were some exciting moments where you felt that we were being actual pioneers on Zoom at that time, which, for example, the scene with the flowers, when Winston throws Auntie Marjorie the flowers, and then somebody in her room has got an identical bunch of flowers and throws the flowers at her, when it looks as if the flowers are flying across Zoom. And also the gag with the gin and tonics, where her gin and tonic ends up in America.
So timing was really important.
Yeah.
Crucial.
Yeah.
And it was the trickiest thing about the whole thing, was because it's on Zoom and there's a slight lag that you don't control. So one gives a cue, and naturally the other person only receives that cue half a second or a second later. So playing with that timing, which was ambiguous and depends on the internet connections and how many people are in, that was, I think, for me personally, the biggest technical challenge.
How many people participated? Because I know you did quite a few different things, didn't you?
It was a really all-inclusive thing where lots of members were involved.
And that was your real idea behind it, wasn't it, Andy?
Absolutely.
About bringing the community together. And that was probably the big reason I wanted to do it. Very much a community feel, wasn't it?
Definitely. And what was really nice was members who had since moved away from Lisbon were also able to be in the audience and take part in the show. It was all about the community, really.
So if you were to do it again, would you change anything?
I think we would do something different.
Yeah, probably.
Because that's the way we are. I mean, there were just so many ideas. I mean, I think we would try and do something even crazier.
I'm afraid. I fear. I'm lonely. I want. I used. I need. I must. I hunger. I feel. I desire friends. Yeah, I need friends. I won't tell you this because it's embarrassing, but I'm going out of my mind with loneliness.
I asked the members about how
they had engaged with the arts during the pandemic and if they'd been able to. And I was also curious to know what they'd missed during this time.
We went to a production of Midsummer Night's Dream at open air at the castle. Another production in the what was it? The Roman theatre excavations. And so there were some things happening, but then, of course, everything stopped.
My year of theatre began, I would say, back in December 2019 when I went to Lisbon and we went to the opening night of A Chorus of Disapproval at the Estrella Hall. It was a wonderful production. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was incredibly sad. At the end, I had tears streaming down my face as I was applauding to think that this was the last time I would ever be in the Estrella Hall seeing a play. I'm so sorry and so sad that the Estrella Hall has gone, and I do have many thoughts about the importance of amateur theatres like this and all that they can do and all that they can offer. And I just really hope that a way is found, a new venue is found which meets the needs of the Lisbon Players so that the good work can be carried on. In March, during our holidays, I went to Stratford to see The Whip by Juliet Jilks Romero, who was writer in residence at the RSC last year. My friend Kate and I were sitting in the RSC restaurant with our tickets and a glass of wine when the waiter came and told us that the show had been cancelled. So it was March the 16th, and Boris Johnson had just announced that everything was going down to lockdown, and the RSC reacted immediately. The cast were in warm-up when the play was cancelled.
Unfortunately, almost not at all. It's been the saddest part, or maybe personally one of the saddest parts of the pandemic.
Since we as a family were affected with the COVID early on in the first lockdown, there was just no space in my mind to be busy with theater. It was all about making sure that my loved ones would just come home safe, and no theater at that time. As an actress, I was used to having gaps between auditions or productions. But this time, of course, it was so much longer. There was really nothing coming in. No auditions, no calls. It was just total silence. Yeah, I started painting just for fun. I'm not good at it at all, but I like it. And that's what I did during my quarantine. I started painting and finding a way to express myself.
I remember actually we read a play. I read a play with a few people a couple of months back, and it was the first time I was actually doing something creative, and it felt so nice to actually be sitting in a room with fellow actors with a script in my hand and actually to be reading something again. It was so nice. I mean, there's been a lot of live theatre happening, digitally, and that's been really nice to see. So the National Theatre Live, their productions that they were putting on YouTube and on NT at Home. And so that's really nice, actually, to be able to see productions. You still feel like you're actually getting to watch a bit of theatre. But obviously it's not the same as being in a theatre. You're getting that atmosphere of what it's like to be actually watching it really live with audience members sitting next to you. But it does help. At least we can watch something. And actually, for some students who don't usually go to the theatre anyway, this is actually, they're almost watching more theatre because it's accessible and it's online than they would be if it wasn't.
I've been thinking of doing a couple of performances in 2020, which of course got cancelled, theatrical performances, but then I converted a lot of them into monologues, which I finally made and put online on YouTube as part of my theatre company, Joy International Theatre. And the result of that was I ended up actually meeting and talking to actors all around the world. So I have now made stuff with actors who I only know from the shoulder up. Hope rises in the strangest of places, I think. Now, one of the things that has happened to me because of the pandemic is that I've also had to think about the stories that we tell each other. Generally, I tell stories which involve questions about the human condition that I'm interested in at that point of time. Now, because of the pandemic, something very funny happened. Suddenly people began to have stories about themselves they never thought they would have. Not stories that arose because something had happened to them, but stories that arose because nothing was happening to them.
Well, I didn't engage a lot, but I did create some projects in the arts field, performance projects, and my recently photographic project, which is called Lisbon. Before the pandemic, working with art for me was, I was still divided between working with arts and trying to survive with any other job as an immigrant in Portugal. So when I first came here, I just wanted so much to have a job, like something that could bring me some secure. And then all the world turned upside down, and so I really realized that the feeling of security was actually just an illusion, because there's no security. I mean, so I just in the end I feel that I'm more connected with arts now than before, because all the illusions I have, they just vanish. I'm just dealing with reality, and reality is excellent for creating.
During the virus times, there have been so many incredibly inventive and creative performances that people have come up with, along with millions of others. I'd never heard of Zoom before April last year. And then Zoom appeared, and I saw some incredible stuff, incredible shows.
Engaging in theatre, I think I've actually done more performing in this last year, strangely enough. Off the top of my head, I think I've been involved in 6 or 7 projects. What seems to have happened, at least in my experience, is now that it's easier for people to get their ideas up and out there, whereas before, I say easier in the sense that before perhaps that you'd have to apply to a theatre company or some cultural centre to fit in with their plans and their programs. Now you can say to 2 or 3 mates, look, I've got this idea. Do you want to do it on Zoom with me? And off you go. It's as simple as that. I'm not saying that people have become more creative, but it does seem to be comparatively easier to get, as I said, to get your stuff out there.
Well, it's completely changed. It has. Everybody's life's changed, but I still sometimes asked to do sewing things for the theatre, which I like doing. It's always a challenge. So we did a film in the cemetery of Benfica of Campo de Rique last October, and I was involved in helping getting the costumes ready for the different characters that appeared in that film. That was fun. We filmed in the open air during the daytime with no lights or anything, just au naturel, and that was quite fun to be there too, doing like we used to, only not quite like before.
I've still found ways that I've been able to engage, again through the creativity of great friends within the Lisbon Players who have found themselves creating online Zoom shows, for example, with Mandy, and the films that Jonathan and his team have created, not as an actor or a director this time, but being invited along to help with technical things, make some rather strange appearances in the background sometimes, but also as a photographer, which is another passion of mine.
Days and nights pass. and the ages fade and bloom like flowers.
What I miss in terms of the theatre and the arts, and I'm coming at this from a performer's perspective, is the rehearsal process, being there in the flesh with other actors, that electricity in the rehearsal room, on stage, when you're bouncing ideas off each other, giggling, getting things wrong, having a glass of wine afterwards, or maybe even before, just to make the process more fluid. I do enjoy that, and I miss that.
Well, what I miss the most, to be honest, is the contact with people, arts people, because I love them so much, or I love us so much. I don't know. I love just talk and be creating together, and the environment that these people bring up. It's just magic.
What I've missed most about the access of the arts being limited is community. Definitely community. Having like-minded people around you that share your passion and drive for acting. That is just so exhilarating, and to not have that, I truly miss that.
Engaged with the theatre, I haven't been engaged with the theatre because the theatre's not there anymore as such. But the people in the company are still active, and although in a different capacity, we are still willing and hopeful that we're going to continue.
Nothing compares to being in a theatre. nothing compares to it. And I mean, obviously, being on stage, also, yeah, you can't sort of replace that with anything else. I miss the adrenaline of getting ready to go on stage, that feeling of being absolutely terrified before stepping foot on stage, and then being on stage and just that amazing feeling. I really miss that, so I hope to be able to do that again soon.
What I miss the most is, of course, it's the presence, the physical presence, and I miss the involvement with the Lisbon Players.
Gosh, I would say, particularly this year, that sense of escapism. I mean, being able to just put yourself in another life for a little while, being able to just experience another reality, maybe for 2 hours, maybe for, a few months while you're in a show. This reality of this year has been so long and so monotonous, and I think, for everyone, I think everyone has missed that opportunity to just get away from it, and I think that's what the arts provide.
I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself king of infinite space, were it not that I have bad dreams.
Whilst the access to the arts has been limited, we have adapted and we've learnt to engage with art in different ways. And the same can be said with Jonathan, and what started originally as a reading ended up as a film. So I chatted with him to find out a bit more about this process and what it was like to make a film.
Well, it was all before the pandemic, before lockdown, and I had written it as it was a documentary reading about people who'd visited Lisbon over the centuries, and we were planning to do it in the Menina e Moça bookshop in the Pink Street in March 2020, was it? But it was the day that the lockdown happened, so we had to cancel it at the very last moment.
Goodness.
Yeah, it was a great pity. We were ready to do it, and we had to cancel it. So then I started thinking, because of lockdown, I started thinking about other ways of doing it, because I liked the text, and I thought it was an interesting bit of a slice of Lisbon history. So the third incarnation was as a film. And that one we did do in the end. We filmed it in one day in April.
How did you have to adapt your idea?
Actually, there was quite a lot of adaptation because the original show was designed to be read by two people playing various parts with, and we had a pianist who was going to provide the music. So it was quite a change because instead of two people reading all the parts, we had 8 or 9 people as different characters. So there was much more characterization. The music we abandoned, but we got David Pesson to write some marvelous music for it. So it was an almost complete transformation, but it had the germ of the original production within it.
Once you'd you'd adapted it to film, how did you go about filming it and making the film?
Well, first of all, location. I got the location. I was very pleased with the location. I didn't really think about doing it anywhere else because that cemetery is such a great place. I then got permission from the cemetery to do it. And then I got the actors together. And their actors are mostly people I've worked with at Lisbon Players on various productions. And they're mostly experienced people. So that wasn't a problem. The only person who was new to it was my neighbor. My neighbor, Pratpi, who is the daughter of immigrants, of Nepalese immigrants who run a vegetable shop in the basement of my building.
Was the idea well received when you suggested it?
It was very well received by everyone. Everyone was very, very welcoming. And then it was watched by a lot of people. Well, it was incredibly intense, actually, because we had to do the film is about just under 40 minutes. We had to do all of the filming in one day, basically, from 11 o'clock until nightfall. And that's the only time we had. And so it was very, very intense, but everyone was on the ball. And that was what was so amazing. You know, we had wonderful assistants. Louise was brilliant behind the lens. We had, the actors were all having fun, I think, and but also behaving themselves and learning their lines and doing their bits properly. So it was a great day of creative activity.
Yeah, it really was a great day, and everyone seemed to really be enjoying themselves. It was a great atmosphere. Besides the time challenge of trying to achieve everything in one day, were there any other challenges you faced?
Well, not really, because the weather was perfect. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. It was actually quite an easy ride on the day. Although I was sweating, I can tell you, sweating all day.
Nerves or running around?
Nerves, not knowing really how to do it. It was kind of I'd written a shooting script, but I'd never done that before, so I didn't know whether the shooting script was going to work. In fact, it worked pretty well. There are things, of course, especially first attempt at making a film, there are things that, in hindsight, I think I would have done differently. But I think that's probably true of anyone, of any film at any time. There are always things you would have done differently, but that doesn't negate the fact that it's good work.
So now that was your first film, and you've since gone on and made your second film. Is it fair to say that you enjoyed the process of making a film?
It is absolutely true. I loved it.
How do you think the future of theatre will change?
Theatre itself, I fear that it might change, and I think I think that theatre is a visceral process. It's a physical process. It's about people being together, both audiences, spectators, actors. It's about physical presence, and I think if we are going to lose even an aspect of that physicality, theatre will change, as it has changed throughout the centuries. But it might be a more dramatic change than we've seen before.
Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, nor bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it's an ever-fixed mark that looks upon tempest but is never shaken. It is a star to every wandering bark, whose worth unknown, although his height be taken.
The pandemic has been a very strange time for all of us, and we've all had to adapt and change to a new reality, one that we could never have imagined. So I wondered what people have learned during this time.
Well, I learned that you can do much more out of remote working. You can literally pack your computer and move somewhere else for months, which is what I did actually. And it was really very nice to try out a different regime, to be able to do some things much more easily, like, well, paddling your kayak on the sea on the beginning of a workday. So all of those things I could have done before because I worked from home, but somehow I was always too rooted in Lisbon.
Not to take for granted how lucky we are, how lucky I am. I certainly know that for the things I have in my life. And to make sure that I'm not taking them for granted. There is that, I heard once, there was a whole load of people who were interviewed at the end of their lives saying, what would you have done differently? And the majority of the responses came back saying, I would have worked less.
I guess I'm doing things that I wouldn't have done before, and I'm learning through that as well. But yeah, I miss my old life terribly, like we all do, and I can't wait to get back to it.
Well, we've learned a lot.
Yeah.
What have we learned, Tony?
Well, working in the RV, we have been learning a lot about plumbing, like electrical stuff, woodworking.
He's a great woodworker.
Pretty much
We learned
everything
that.
related to a building.
I mean, yeah. I guess in a way it's been a creative outlet. Maybe you're looking for a more profound answer to that, or we learned about ourselves or our feelings about life. I don't know. I'm definitely an extrovert. I miss people so much. I think Bruno's less of an introvert than he thought he was because he misses people too.
Yeah.
What have I found that kind of has come around from the pandemic that's actually been quite good? One thing I've actually found, I mean, aside from theatre, aside from teaching, it's really been keeping in touch with people in a funny way has been almost easier than it was before, in the sense that it doesn't matter whether the person lives just down the road or whether they live in a completely different country or a different continent even. Suddenly, Zoom, it doesn't matter, you know. So I've actually been talking to friends of mine back in the UK a lot more than I was talking to them before the pandemic. Having lockdown, and because of the pandemic, we've all kind of learned to embrace Zoom and embrace this virtual life.
I think that with the pandemic, we all slowed down a lot. We were obliged to slow down. So we had all to come to this slower pace and actually almost still, to keep still. And that was, I think, an opportunity to think.
Obviously, I've learned. I'm always willing to learn, and everything that we do, you have to confront it with openness to say, let me try. I mean, I never say no, and always have a go. So pandemic or no pandemic, it's no big deal. It's part of life, isn't it?
Well, so what did I do? Well, creative work has always been very important to me. So I painted a painting about the effect of lightning on a set. It looks like, for someone said, a murder mystery like Agatha Christie. I also painted some tablecloths with fabric tape that won't disappear. So Jonathan and Lucy and I had it was okay during lockdown.
As an artist, I would say that I think I've learned that, you know, when there's not a theater to play in or a movie to shoot, this feeling inside remains, this feeling of wanting to express oneself. And, you know, we can't depend on others to give us the work. And when there's literally nothing happening around you, that is the time to actually truly explore what is your own artistry, what is your way of finding expression to your feelings, emotions.
I think because of the pandemic, everything was so real, and the fears were so real that the other concerns about what you're gonna do with your life, they were just silly after the pandemic. So in this sense, I think I feel stronger than before to pursue my dreams.
20, the year that vanished, was also the year that a lot of preconceptions vanished along with it, in terms of the possibilities of what could be. And we are hopefully going to learn from that and then produce new forms of art, online, virtual, using AI technology. So yes, it's been a year of transfiguration, transmogrification, and metamorphosis. Lessons learned, morality slightly reworked, and maybe preconceptions challenged.
There's been some really great innovations during the pandemic, and people have brought us theatre when we didn't think that was possible. I met with the artistic committee to find out a bit more about what's been going on with Lisbon Players and how they have been responding to the pandemic.
Obviously, we had a double pandemic in the sense that we were left homeless and then we had a pandemic. So I think talking about how the pandemic affected the Lisbon Players, I'm not quite sure what's worse, being homeless or having a pandemic. So it's quite unfair to be actually in this position at the moment.
I think it shows sort of resilience,
Yeah.
of not only loads of theatre companies, but certainly in our case, last year, as you say, double pandemic really for us, when the proposal, which was going to be a live stage show for, I think, 2 actors, they came to Lisbon, or we came to Lisbon. Then it became a walk through the British Cemetery with the public to various places, and then, oh no, that's a bit dangerous because things aren't getting better. So it becomes a film, the first film made by Lisbon Players. So it's a top-to-adapt, improve, experiment. Individual communities or one's own community. I live very close to here, and because we've been stuck here really for months, I've got to know so many more people, locals, because you see them every day. So you begin to know that, oh, they're the ones who live in that house and they've got that funny dog. All sorts sorts of interesting things you find out, it becomes much more a togetherness. I think it shows a wonderful solidarity and resilience.
I think the characteristic of being outgoing and curious about people and solidarity is something characteristic of people in the performing arts. And the COVID time, none of us were still. I know some people got depressed. I certainly found it very positive. As Susie says, you either die or you open your eyes and think of new things and gain compassion, which we need, and patience. For me, it's been a big lesson in patience.
There is a togetherness between artists, but the audiences as well are being super solidarity. There's a lot of solidarity and understanding. The audience is not only they're hungry for art, but they're patient and they understand and they're okay to adapt as well to your. They appreciate you trying, and I think that I could see that with the Zoom show, how people were just really happy to be seeing something.
During the lockdown, either film, TV, music, books, anything to do with culture art is what managed to help people get through this.
Ironically, although theatres were closed, the industry carried on in television and film. They just took extra,
like Lisbon Players adapted into the film instead. So, I think it's people need this.
A poem about a pub. Do you remember an inn, Miranda? Do you remember an inn? And the tedding and the spreading of the straw for a bedding, and the fleas at teas in the high Pyrenees, and the wine that tasted of tar, and the cheers and the jeers of the young muleteers under the vine of the dark veranda. Do you remember an inn, Miranda? Do you remember an inn? And the cheers and the jeers of the young muleteers who hadn't got a penny and who weren't paying any, and the hammer and the door and the din. Well, it's closed, Miranda. No sound in the walls of the halls where falls the tread of the dead to the ground. No sound but the boom of the distant waterfall like doom. But it's reopening soon, Miranda. Maybe in June. And there's plenty of room where you and I can enjoy the hip-hop-hap of the clap of the hands to the twirl and the swirl of the girl gone chancing, glancing, dancing, backing and advancing, snapping to the clapper of the spin, out and in, and the ting-tong-tang of the guitar. See you there, Miranda.
So, what does the future of theatre look like?
What is the future of theatre? Well, who knows? Who the hell knows, right?
The future of theatre, I just want it to be back how it was.
I think the future of theatre is the same as it's always been.
That live arts, live theatre will return to what we traditionally know it as.
I think it's very similar to its past, probably. I think the future of theatre is presence, physical presence.
I think that theater will find a way, just like life will find a way.
I think it's full of new and exciting adventures, and I think it's promising, and I just really hope it comes sooner rather than later.
Finding ways to connect with people all around the world at the same time.
Is unity. Art unites.
I think that what's going to happen is I think we're going to get back to a lot of the, I hope, the way that we are used to seeing theatre, but also with a lot more creativity and different ideas thrown into it. I think it's actually rather very, very exciting. I just wish it would happen soon.
So I do think that there are and will be some interesting developments in theatre that will not go away when we are able to return to the normal stage. I think we will keep some of these innovations, both in the way theatre is made and in the way in which it is shared. And so I think stepping into a new world, I don't think we'll go back.
Maybe a modern renaissance, and it has to come back, and it has to come back in a big way.
Will not die. Arts will out.
Here we go! Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to see everybody dance.
Dance, guys!
I want to break free. I want to break free. I want to break free from your lies. You're so self-satisfied, I don't need you. I want to break free. God knows I want to break free. It's strange, but it's true. I can't get over the way you love me like you do, but I have